Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias' Stories. We now return to America is in the Heart, A Personal History by Carlos Bulosan. Part 3, Chapter 34. I was psychologically unprepared when the doctor started operating on me. 2 other experiments by another doctor. Phrenic operation and a treatment called pneumothorax failed to assuage the widening lesion in my right lung. The contagion was rapidly spreading to my left lung, and thoracoplasty or a rib operation was the last possible way to arrest its advance. My first operation came in June. In 3 weeks, I had another. Finally, in the middle of August, when the wound had healed, I had the third and last. The last was easy, and the wound healed faster than the other 2. I saw the doctor before he left the hospital. He said, "You have no more ribs on your right side, young man, but you will live for a while. Mabuhay!" For a while. All right then. I lay on my right side so that my weight would press my body down. One way of finding relief from the pain. I was transferred to a small ward where another patient, a tall Mexican, was waiting for his operation. His left lung was gone. There was a wide hole in his back. There were 2 small rubber tubes. There was a wide hole in his back where 2 small rubber tubes were inserted to drain out the fluid. He could not speak English, but we understood each other. On Sunday night, during the visiting hours, the Mexican told me to watch for the door when his wife came. The wife, a gaudy woman, gathered her dress about her and went into the bed with her husband. I woke up the next morning to see a nurse rolling the Mexican away. He was dead. Maybe he knew that he would die. I had seen men die before, but not the way this Mexican died. I returned to the old building. I went to my place on the porch, facing the lawn where WPA workers were digging a wide hole. There were 3. A supervisor who was always lying under a tree, a man with a shovel, and another man who took the shovel from him when he was not reading a newspaper. When the hole was about 5 feet deep, the 2 men would fill it up with the earth that they had dug from it. Then they would move about 10 feet from it and start digging another hole. For 6 months, they dug holes in the lawn and filled them up. I wondered what they were doing. But when they were gone, some of the patients said that it was one way of keeping unemployed men out of trouble. Once a week on Sundays, amateur musicians and singers came to the hospital. I was still on my back, so the attendants propped me up. Their voices cracked, but I enjoyed the hula dancers. Some of the patients who could afford it threw dimes and quarters on the floor. The entertainers went from ward to ward, dancing and singing, but 6 months afterward, they stopped coming. It was then that the WPA was vehemently assailed by reactionary politicians in Congress. But I had my books. Throughout that year, I read 1 book a day, including Sundays. I could obtain all the books I wanted from Eileen Odell. I discovered a world of music, of light and immortal things. I trembled with delight when I came upon a brilliant phrase or a novel idea. While the other patients were worrying and complaining, I explored the worlds of great men's living minds. One of these men was an American poet, Hart Crane, who wrote The Bridge. His intense frenzy of words captivated my imagination. I leaped with him across the magnificent steel arc over the river, flew into the dizzy heights of fire, plunged into the sea and peace. Here was a writer in the tradition of Whitman and Melville. He tried to find a faith strong enough to challenge modern chaos. The bridge, the symbol of his faith in America, an ecstatic conjuration against false gods and legends, was also a myth that he tried to create out of the turmoil of modern industrialism. And another book, Mikhail Sholokhov's And Quiet Flows the Dawn, gave me a panorama of the historic birth of a socialist country, but it also gave me an insight into the collective faith of a people, its growth and flowering. I knew that it was good literature, that it was honest and written with a purpose. It was an introduction to other Russian writers, Maxim Gorky, Alexander Pushkin, Nikolai Gogol, Leo Tolstoy, Ivan Turgenev, Fyodor Dostoevsky, and Anton Chekhov. But it was Gorky, the vagabond and tramp, the tubercular outcast, who most attracted me. Perhaps it was because I identified myself with him in his lowly birth, his wanderings in the vast Russian land, his sufferings and the nameless people who had suffered with him. Gorky made me aware of his counterparts in America, Jack London, Mark Twain, and the youngest of them all, William Saroyan. All these Americans did not stir my social conscience. Their struggles and successes fired me with ambition. Now I could understand and appreciate the appearance of a Chinese writer named Lu Xun, whose stories were compared with Maxim Gorky's, not in style, but in dignity and humanity. I discovered that one writer led to another, that they were all moved by the same social force. While Federico Garcia Lorca was writing passionately about the folklore of the peasants in Granada, Nicolas Guillen was chanting verses of social equality for the Negro people in Puerto Rico. While Andre Malraux was dramatizing the heroism of the Chinese communists, a Filipino, Manuel E. Arguilla, was writing of the peasantry on the island of Luzon. So from day to day I read, and reading widened my mental horizon, creating a spiritual kinship with other men who had pondered over the miseries of their countries. Then it came to me that the place did not matter. These sensitive writers reacted to the social dynamics of their time. I too reacted to my time. I promised myself that I would read 10,000 books when I got well. I plunged into books, boring through the earth's core, leveling all seas and oceans, swimming in the constellations. Chapter 35. I had cultivated a friendship with a young boy named John Custer, a patient in another ward. He came to our ward one morning and looked at me for a long time, as though he were afraid to talk. "Will you do something for me?" he said finally. He fumbled in his pockets for a piece of writing paper. "It's for my ma in Arkansas." I took the paper from him. "You just say I'm okay." I started writing to an American mother in Arkansas. She had never heard of me, and I had never seen her, but her son was a common bond between us. I was writing to her what I had had in my mind and heart for years. The words came effortlessly. I was no longer writing about this lonely, sick boy, but about myself and my friends in America. I told her about the lean, the lonely, and miserable years. I mentioned places and names. I was not writing to an unknown mother anymore. I was writing to my own mother, plowing in the muddy fields of Mangusmana. It was the one letter I should have written before. I was telling her about America. Actually, I was writing to all the unhappy mothers whose sons left and did not return. There were years to remember, but they came and went away. I was telling them about those years. Then it was finished. I read the letter slowly. When I finished reading, he was crying. I have never learned to write, he said. I had no time for learning in Arkansas. I realized that this poor American boy had worked all his life. I could have told him then that I had worked all my life too. I could have told him that I came from that part of my country where there were very few schools. I could have told him that for a long time the world of books was closed to me. I could have told him that I had been denied the little things in life that were denied to him. I could have told him that I had acquired my education by working hard. Yes, I could have told him because when I looked at him, I knew he would understand. When he left the hospital, I said to him, "Rediscover America. You are still young. Someday, I will hear from you." "I will remember what you said," he said. "Yes, John," I said. "It's only in giving the best we have that we can become a part of America." "Thanks." And he left. Years passed and the war came. Then one day, I received a letter from him. He wrote in part, "I doubt if you remember me. I met you in the Los Angeles County Hospital years ago, and you wrote a letter for me. I returned to Arkansas and followed your suggestion. I found a job and educated myself when I was not working. I have studied American history, which was your suggestion. Learning to read and write is knowing America, my country. Knowing America is actually knowing myself. Knowing myself is also knowing how to serve my country. Now, I'm serving her." When summer came, I was free to go outside the building. I would take the elevator and go down and sit on the sunlit grass beyond our porch. My brother Macario came back to Los Angeles. "I couldn't get a visa," he said. "Nick couldn't get one either, but Felix is now in Spain." But the war in Spain was about to end. The Republican government was about to be crushed. Macario knew that the fight would be over in a few months. He had found work in a downtown restaurant and rented a house in Echo Park. Nick, who had come back with my brother from Mexico, went to Alaska to work in the fish canneries. When he returned to the mainland, he proceeded to Portland, where UCAPAWA Local 226, an affiliate of the CIO, had fallen into the hands of reactionary leaders because of the departure of Jim Luna for the Philippines. Nick seized his opportunity and, offering a progressive program, was elected Secretary-Treasurer. Now the local in Seattle was also in the hands of our group. The leadership in San Francisco was held by Americans and Chinese. But Jose tried vainly to break into it because the Filipino membership was large. He gave up in failure and went to San Pedro, where the cannery workers had been organized into the AFL by a dramatic Mexican woman unionist. Again, Jose's attempt to put the workers into the CIO failed, so he went to Alaska to observe the situation there. When I heard from him again, he was in Portland, fighting against the element that was trying to break the local, which had been reinvigorated by Nick's progressivism. So, while I was waiting for a possible improvement in the hospital, my companions were fighting in the trade union movement and for the propagation of progressive ideas. I wanted to work with them again. I wanted to work with them again. Chapter 36. Toward the end of May, the sun came close to the earth. The heat was stifling, and the patients were alarmed. Those in the ward seemed to die as fast as the flies that came into the hospital through the wide squares of the screen. Now in the summer, there were more deaths than in the winter, when the cold gravely affected the patients. But the porch where I was had became a luxury and a symbol of my attachment to life, for there was a soothing coolness under the large tree near it. There was no other tree near the building, and as the number of deaths in the ward piled higher, the tree began to indicate recovery and survival to me. I believed in the potency of the tree. I, who had grappled with the forces of evil, also believed in its power. Perhaps it was because I wanted to live so urgently that I ascribed a mystical power to the tree. And in this urgent need to live, I worshipped it like a pagan. I knew that no man in our ward died, or in the other wards that were near the tree. I was not alone in this superstitious attachment to the tree. Other patients felt the same faith. We felt we were alive because of it. When the slight breeze rustled its leaves, we got up from our beds and stood near it. I held on to my faith, although the doctors disputed it. Let them. I held on to the tree as though its leaves protected me from death. When one of the patients went to a rest home or sanitarium, a lucky patient in the ward would take his place on the porch. Most of us on the porch were, quote unquote, walking patients, and we helped the attendants with the racks of food. We also helped them change the beds of the other patients. Perhaps from this psychological basis, we created an immunization. I noticed that when a bed patient was transferred to the porch, he recovered rapidly and helped the attendants with the trays or other patients. I was allowed to do minor chores for the nurses, and all of us were free to play cards. Panagos, the Greek, was very adept at sweeping the floor. He woke up early in the morning before the nurses came out with the charts and started pushing the laundry rack so that he could clean the floor before the attendants came with the trays of food. But Sobel, the Jew from Poland, could not be outdone. He would stand in the hallways waiting for the racks of food, and when the attendants came with them, Sobel would push them into the porch and ward, singing peasant songs as he carried the trays of those who were too weak to get out of their beds. I liked this part of my life on the porch. I promised myself that if I got out, I would go back to visit those who would be left. I had something to eat. I had books. I had Eileen Odell. I had many friends now. I had had none of these on the outside. I had had only violence. I was afraid, even if I were well again, to go out and live in such a world. The hot days of summer came and went. The war in Spain was nearly over. I read Barbusi's Under Fire, and then at the insistence of Eileen Odell, Erich Maria Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front. Passionate war books, intensely written with a message for a tottering world. then Romain Rolland's Jean Christophe, Thomas Maine's Magic Mountain, the stories of Liam O'Flaherty, the plays of Sean O'Casey, and the poetry of the proletarians in the United States. I felt that I was at home with the young American writers and poets. Reading them drove me back to the roots of American literature, to Walt Whitman and the tumult of his time. And for him, from his passionate dream of an America of equality for all races, a tremendous idea burned my consciousness. Would it be possible for an immigrant like me to become a part of the American dream? Would I be able to make a positive contribution toward the realization of this dream? I was enchanted by this dream, and the hospital, dismal as it was, became a world of hope. I discovered the other democratic writers and poets who in their diverse ways contributed toward the enlargement of the American dream. My sudden discovery of America made me a lost man in the hospital. I felt I could not converse with the other patients because of their intellectual sterility. I acquired a mask of pretense that became a weapon. I acquired a mask of pretense that became a weapon I was to take out with me into the violent world again. A mask of pretense at ignorance and illiteracy, because I felt that if they knew that I had intellectual depths, they would reject my presence. I remembered Robinson Crusoe and compared him with my fate. But my lostness was deeper because I was lonely among men. This loneliness was to encircle my life, to close around it, marring my vision, so that my thoughts were filled with melancholia. I wanted to go away from the hospital. Perhaps a new environment would give me a fresh outlook. In fact, I had been in the hospital 2 years now, long enough to be transferred to a sanitarium for complete recovery. I told my doctor of my desire to be moved away. He told me that it was beyond his jurisdiction. I asked the social service department to look into my case. A woman came to interview me. She wanted to know when I had come to the United States, my brothers' names and occupations, and the names of their wives and children, and also, which I thought ridiculous, the names and education of my parents and their immediate relatives. Could I tell her about my labors in Mangusmana and Binalonan? Could I tell her how I started working as a herd boy at 5? Could I tell her about my starvation in Baguio and my early years in America? Could I tell her some of the violence and of my fears, my flights? It was the simplest way of eliminating certain patients from relief care for technical reasons. My plea for a transfer was shelved. I could not go to a sanitarium. I should have known, but I had illusions and was immersed in my studies. This was one of the realities that I had overlooked in the brilliance of my gigantic dream to know all America. I revealed my predicament to the doctor when he came to see me. He took it up with the social service department, and another woman came to see me. "There is nothing I can do for you," she said. "You are ineligible to go to a sanitarium for technical reasons." "I didn't commit any crime," I said. "You were a minor when you came to the United States," she explained kindly. "If you had any relatives who had taken care of you when you came, it would be a different story. As it stands, you were a minor, and as far as I know, you need a guardian to sign all these papers." "It is very foolish," the doctor said. "We doctors try our best to help these patients toward recovery, but their future is dependent upon stupid restrictions." "I'm sorry," said the woman. "There is nothing I can do. This is a big institution, and I'm just a worker here." "You are actually hanging him on a tree," the doctor said. The woman left. All right, that was it. I began to feel like the Mexicans who thought the doctors were killing them off because there were too many of them. I was angry and afraid at the same time. Slowly, I reviewed my life. It had always been chaotic. I became truly afraid to face America. I brought my case before the Social Service Department again. The first woman came, not to help me, but to tell me that there was racism even in the Los Angeles County Hospital. "You Filipinos," she said calmly, "ought to be shipped back to your jungle homes." I felt consoled when I realized that this social service woman was only voicing a personal opinion, an individual hate against Filipinos. I had read enough books now to know the roots of racism. I had had experience with it when I was still on the outside. I was crushed. I wanted to be brave, but there was no hope. And once again, as when I landed in the United States, I felt a rising tide of fear and revolt. Fear always worked this way with me. I had seen so much prejudice that I reacted murderously when confronted by it. When my brother Macario came to see me, I told him about the whole affair. "I'll get you out of this hole, Carl," he said. "I have a job now, and I'll take care of you until you are well again." "I don't know if we should take this step," I said. "I need medical attention and care." "I'll take care of that too," he said. "Don't worry, I'll come next week. I knew that I would be a burden to Macario, but it seemed the only way. I packed all my books and magazines. Eileen Odell came with a new briefcase with my name on it and arranged my poems and some scattered chapters of my autobiography. Then Victor, who was living with my brother in a Japanese hotel downtown, came to take my things away. On one June morning, exactly 2 years after I went to the hospital, I said goodbye to my companions and the personnel on our floor. Chapter 37. I was afraid to leave the hospital. I knew that a perilous life awaited me outside, that I would be inevitably caught in its whirlpools. I had never known peace, except in the hospital, where there was always something to eat and a place to sleep on the cold nights. There was also genuine friends who sat with me in the hopeless hours, the black days of my operations. On the outside, life was alien and unfriendly, and the summer days were long and the winter nights were sharp with cold. I was determined to face it again. But now, with an unswerving intellectual weapon, maybe I would win this time. And if I did, would I not create a legend of courage and valor that other poor young men could emulate? My brother was not yet in the hotel when I arrived. I waited in the lobby. Victor came first. We climbed the winding stairs into their little room. Then my brother came with sandwiches, and Victor went downstairs for a bottle of milk. It was good to be with them again. On Sundays, they awoke at noon and walked to First Street, talked to the Pinoys, ate Filipino food, and went to a movie when night came. Their friends also lived the same humdrum life. They met in a dingy restaurant or a dark pool room to exchange news. Then they scattered for another week of endless drudgery. It was the same life that had filled me with fear when I had arrived in America. It was the same life that led me to the labor movement. Now I must decide what to do with my remaining years. I slept with Victor in the bed while Macario slept on the floor. It was the same routine all over again. Only now Leon was long dead and other members of our group were in jail or wandering somewhere. Then my brother decided that we had to move from the hotel because climbing up and down the 4 flights of stairs with my stiff knee was dangerous to my health. Victor suggested that we find a place around Vermont Avenue. We packed our belongings. I was surprised to know that after 8 years in the United States, I had only 1 blue suit, a cheap suitcase, and 3 shirts. Victor and my brother were a little better off because they had worked more steadily. Macario and I boarded a streetcar and went to the Vermont Avenue district. What we encountered almost broke my heart. We saw a nice little apartment house near Commonwealth Avenue, and when we approached, the landlady took away the "for rent" sign. She went inside the house and peered furtively through a window. When sure that we would not go back, she went out to the yard again and put up the sign. The next woman was more discreet. She stood by the sign as we approached. "This house is not for rent," she said awkwardly. "The sign is nailed to the wall and it's hard to pull out. Maybe you can find one next block?" But the next woman faced the issue squarely. She said, "We don't take Filipinos." My brother was persistent. He interviewed every apartment manager in the whole area. I have often wondered why he seemed so blind to the open prejudice of the people. Perhaps his good education and correct upbringing in the Philippines and his association with educated and well-meaning Americans made him forgiving. I do not know what made him tolerant, because even now, when he is once more in the Philippines, he writes to tell me how much he has missed America. I was different. Where there was prejudice, I challenged it with prejudice. But where there was goodness, I reacted with goodness. This attitude, too, was conditioned by my experiences. In the years before I went to the hospital, when I was growing up in a world of horror, I fought against the perpetuation of brutal memories. Maybe I succeeded in erasing the sores, but the scars remained to remind me, in moments of spiritual vicissitudes of the tragic days of those years. And even now, when I can look back without the black fury of hate that I had, I still double my fists. I gave up looking for a better place to live. The only section where we were allowed to stay was notorious for criminals, pimps, gamblers, and prostitutes. We could not find a place even in Boyle Heights, the Jewish section, nor in the Mexican district. I was washing our clothes when Jose, who had suddenly appeared in Los Angeles, knocked on the door. "I'm married now, Carl," he said, "and I have a little boy. I named him after you. I hope he will grow up to carry on the tradition." "I know he will, Jose," I said. I knew that he hated to be tied down. Jose knew that it was the end, that the happy yet violent days in the labor movement were over. I saw it in his face, and seeing its unmistakable presence, I was more determined to live and to study harder. I felt that I must vindicate Jose and our other companions who had either given up the fight or left for the Philippines. I knew that I must acquire all the knowledge that would have been theirs had they fought on, that I must succeed for them all now that they had given up. "Would you like to see my wife and son?" Jose asked. "All right." I followed him into the street. He was driving a car. We arrived at the bungalow where his wife was still sleeping. "My wife can't read," he whispered when we entered the living room. "But how she can love!" In the kitchen, standing and sitting on the floor, dark and light, were Jose's wife's numerous sisters. Which one among my sisters-in-law would you like, Carl? Jose asked, winking suggestively. They are all single except Teresa. He pointed to the married woman. I would take Teresa anytime, I said. Let's celebrate then, Jose said, producing a bottle of port wine. In the evening, filled with wine, I stumbled into the hotel room with Teresa's help. I sat for an hour on a chair waiting for the effects of the wine to subside. When I was a little better, I jumped to my feet and touched Teresa's face. She pushed me away and flung herself upon the bed, weeping bitterly when I moved to touch her again. Why were the women in my world always crying? Was there too much frustration in their lives? Were they hungry for compassion? I remembered my sisters. They too were always weeping. What was it that made all of them cry? I remember my mother crying when my sister Irene died with the unfinished polka dot dress in her little hands. I was to run from crying women because I was afraid they would invoke emotion in me. I was afraid of such emotion because they emanated from pity. I hardened myself against pity. And so in later years, after I had successfully persevered through a spiritual crisis, I hurled contempt at women who tried to arouse deep emotions in me. I flung against them the tides of my hate, and when they started to weep, I only increased my bitterness. I thought it was the only way for me to live, to stand free, to walk unhindered across the land. Well, there is nothing else to do but go back to our world, said my brother. I saw an apartment on Temple Street, I said. Victor's face darkened with disapproval. Teresa came with her car and drove us to the place. It was known as a house of prostitution, but there was no other house for rent. The street was filled with pimps and prostitutes, drug addicts and marijuana peddlers, cutthroats and murderers, ex-convicts and pickpockets. It was the rendezvous of social outcasts, known for its wide-open red light district. What would happen to Eileen if she were to try to visit me here? What would I say if the police broke into our apartment? Was there a place in this vast continent where Filipinos were allowed to live in peace? There were 2 bedrooms and a bath downstairs, a living room, a kitchen, and a storeroom. The back door faced a vacant lot brown with tall dead grass. Grass! Oh, the years of green grass and the earth. In the center were 3 old houses, toppling slowly but inevitably to the ground, where several Mexican families lived. At night, I could see them in their beds. They were careless and primitive. One night, the apartment on our left was raided and 3 prostitutes were caught with their customers. I heard them run out of the apartments and hide in the dead grass. The policemen found them with their strong flashlights and dragged them to their cars in the street. One of the prostitutes had jumped from the window and broke her leg. She was groaning with pain when 2 policemen carried her away. One time, a Filipino in the apartment across from ours shot his American wife in the abdomen. I was reading Gustavo Meyer's Ending of Hereditary American Fortunes when I saw the man come home from work. He arrived too soon. His wife was entertaining another Filipino, a gambler. A quarrel between the Filipino and his wife ensued, during which the gambler walked out unnoticed. There was silence for an hour. Then I saw the wife coming out with her suitcase. The husband stopped her at the door. They wrestled for the suitcase. The woman disappeared for a moment, and there was silence. Then she appeared at the door again and the Filipino reappeared with a gun and shot her in the abdomen. He fired another shot into his own chest. They lay side by side in the living room. In a little while, the Filipino stirred, then rolled over on his side and crawled to the door for support, holding his chest tightly. He stumbled into the pathway. He staggered to the landlady's apartment and told her to call the police. Then he walked blindly to his wife and tried to carry her upstairs. He fell 3 times. Then there was silence, and I thought they were dead. When the police came, they were lying side by side on a blood-soaked bed, but still breathing and alive. In another apartment, a husband took poison because he discovered that his son belonged to another man. His wife, thinking that he was dead, took poison and died, but he came out alive and took care of the child as though it were his own. One night I found Teresa sleeping on the cement steps near our apartment. I carried her inside and watched her sleep until she woke up. Then she told me that she was unhappy with her Italian husband. "He is a gambler," she confessed. "One day I came home from work and found that he had sold our stove. I had some food with me and I wanted to cook it, but the stove was gone." Was there a happy situation in the world outside of books? My despair led me to fairy tales, Arabian Nights, Grimm's fairy tales, Andersen's tales, Aesop's fables, Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. These books stimulated me to go back to the folklore of my own country. I discovered with amazement that Filipino folklore was uncollected, that native writers had not assimilated it into their writings. This discovery gave me an impetus to study the common roots of our folklore, and upon finding it in the tales and legends of the pagan Igorots in the mountains of Luzon near my native province, I blazed with delight at this new treasure. Now I must live and integrate Philippine folklore in our struggle for liberty. My interest in folklore led me to the lives of Filipino heroes. Knowing them led me to the mainsprings of our history, to Jose Rizal, whose story had been told to me years ago by my brother Macario when I had been sick in Binalonan. Why had I forgotten him until now? I did not know. This was the world into which I was thrown when I left the hospital. I wanted to run away from it, but did not know where to go. I could take the freight train again, but was I strong enough? I could no longer work with my hands. The right was partially paralyzed. My left leg was shrunken and stiff. I had never learned a trade. One day, the doctor from the hospital came to see me. "I think I should tell you, Carl," he said. "You haven't many years to live." "How many do you think?" I asked. "It's hard to say. Your lungs are greatly impaired. The perforation in the right one is the size of a silver dollar. And the way you live." He looked around the bare room and outside to the tenement houses. "If you go on this way, you are lucky if you live another 5 years. 5 years. I was terrified. I loved life so much, but now I knew that I would be deprived of it. All right, I knew what to do. I would show those who had driven me to this corner of death that I would not be cheated of these last 5 years. All right, I would show them. All right. "I don't want to die yet," I told Macario. "I cannot believe that I have only a few years left. There are so many things I would like to do." "There is nothing we can do, Carl," he said, "but we will stick together until the end." "I would like to do something positive," I said. "I will work for both of us," he said gently. "You stay home." He was so kind, so gentle. "Maybe you will find something to do." "I would like to write," I said. "But maybe I was not meant to be a writer. I would like to tell the story of our life in America. I remember vividly how you described our fate. It's a great wrong that a man should be hungry and illiterate and miserable in America. Yes, it is a great wrong. Maybe I could write it down for all the world to see. I'll sacrifice my life and future for whatever you think is right, Carlos, he said. I felt vast and immortal. Now he had used my native name again. I looked at him and knew that he meant it. I knew that he would help me live for a while so that I could write about our anguish and our hopes for a better America. I knew that if he died somewhere in pursuit of what he had wanted to be, he would live again in me and in all the words that seized my mind.